And so Tommy Aiello is the Senior Director of Government Affairs at the National Taxpayers Union, and he is here to explain what we know about the tariffs and why these may be placed. So good morning, Tommy, and what is the Commerce Department thinking exactly?
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me. So as you mentioned, the Commerce Department, they're looking into whether they want to hit new tariffs on all of the goods and much more than what you mentioned. And their rationale is there's a national security imperative to produce these things here in the United States. Unfortunately, the way they're going about it with these new tariffs, as we've seen on other products, it's going to raise the cost of these products when they reach the United States. And I think when you think about it right now, people are receiving their premium increases in the mail, and they're very concerned about the cost of healthcare. If you were to tariff these really important goods that Americans rely on to remain healthy, you're going to raise their costs, and it's going to raise the cost of healthcare even further. So this really is a kitchen table issue for millions of Americans.
Yeah, and so on what basis is the department determining that import levels of these products threaten or impair national security? I mean, I get that President Trump, and even in his first term, taking back manufacturing domestically, all of that was a huge priority for him and still is. But that doesn't translate to suggesting that somehow this is a national security issue if we don't place a tariff just to push manufacturing to the United States.
Yeah, he's using an old law that would allow him to do this. And I think the president is right, and you said it too. We want to produce more things in the United States, whether it is masks or pacemakers or steel or whatever it is, right? I think every American would agree that we can and probably should produce more in the United States. We just don't think tariffs are a strong way to get there. Instead, we're urging the administration to do three things to actually increase American manufacturing. One, energy dominance. One of the largest input factors for a factory is electricity. He should continue to produce more oil and gas on federal lands to allow more oil and gas to come to the market. That will lower energy costs across the board. Two, tax certainty. His One Big Beautiful Bill includes so many great provisions for working class people and for businesses. The business provisions will allow companies to immediately put their capital to work. That's a really great thing. And three, permitting reform. It takes way too long for environmental reviews and permitting for companies to build their factories at the state and federal level. Let's cut the red tape and allow all these products to roll off the line at a much faster pace than they are now.
Yeah, and all of that actually makes sense. And so what is the rationale for not just pursuing some of these incentives and pushing for manufacturing to return to America's shores instead of placing a tariff, which ultimately would be, the cost would be at the expense really of the American people? I mean, it seems like, again, I can't connect the dots between the rationale here of why the tariff is where the Commerce Department is going if the end goal is manufacturing in the United States.
I think the administration, they want to just try and tariff everything and use it as leverage, but that's not the best way to go about it. We're hearing from businesses large and small that rely on these affordable, accessible products, and that's what they are. The United States, we produce things at a more expensive cost than other parts of the country, particularly in Asia. So when those goods come to the United States, hospitals and consumers and patients, they can rely on these affordable products. But if you were to tariff them, hearing aids, for example, can cost between $5,000 to $7,000. If you were to impose a 100% tariff on those hearing aids, American consumers would bore the actual cost of that, right? That 100% tariff would cost, hearing aids $14,000. That's a lot of money. But, the president says foreign countries pay the tariff. I think we can agree that that's not true. In some cases, they pay part of the tariff. But when those goods come to the United States, it's the importer that pays it. They pass it along to hospitals. The hospitals pass it along to the insurance companies, and the insurance companies pass those costs on to consumers. But at the end of the day, there's no one for the consumer to pass the cost on to, so they are the ones that have to eat it. And I think that's what's really lost in this conversation is how does it impact consumers?
Yeah, and I think that that's really where the conversation would go next when, as the Congressman Tom Tiffany, who was on in the previous segment, was relaying that Americans are still suffering over the Biden inflation that is dropping but is still there. A number of other costs, and now with the government shutdown, I mean, so many other factors that come into this. Now, if this type of tariff were to be passed, then that would be yet just another issue, especially on goods and services that really are essential. I mean, these aren't luxury items. These aren't things that are maybe just a contemplation that people can pick and choose or take or leave. These are things that would be essential items, and so the Commerce Department, at least in the Federal Register, has had a notice for request for public comments. I'm sure that, a lot of the organizations such as yours are, putting in some of those comments and so forth. But that's almost a pro forma kind of measurement. I know that those, often don't really have that much of an impact. What would have an impact in terms of the Commerce Department maybe looking at changing their strategy here?
I think there's two things, and I think the congressman is exactly right. Inflation is still high. It's definitely lower than it was when President Biden was in office, and that's a testament to the work the president's doing. I think the data shows that tariffs increase costs, and that's why inflation is as sticky as it is. Now, what would cause the Commerce Department to change course? One, I think it's hearing from actual people, hearing how this would impact them. Even though the comment period has closed, you can still send letters and you can still make your voice heard. And two, I think what's really going to change the mind of the administration in this whole tariff conversation is how is it impacting businesses? Right now, we've lost manufacturing jobs every single month over the president's second term. Now, why is that happening? We believe it's because of the tariff situation. I think if we were to solve the tariff situation, whether through the Supreme Court or these trade deals that the president is negotiating, it'll give our businesses a little bit more certainty that they can invest in the United States. They can produce these goods at an affordable cost, maybe not as affordable as a foreign country can, but that's okay. We don't need to produce every single thing under the sun. We're 4% of the global population. It's okay to import, rubber gloves or face masks, or they can come in at an affordable cost for everybody to enjoy. It'll allow the United States to produce other things that other countries can't do. And that's the best thing about comparative economics. Everyone has a comparative advantage. And in this case, perhaps we should leave it to foreign countries that we can rely on.
Yeah, and has there been a coalition of healthcare system stakeholders like hospitals, device manufacturers, distributors, and all of this to assess the operational impacts of tariffs? I mean, not just necessarily the cost, but there would be an operational increase as well. Are they involved as a stakeholder?
From what we've read through some of the Commerce Department's comments that have been filed so far, it's pretty widely agreed across the board, including the American Hospital Association and some device manufacturers, that they're all saying they wouldn't be able to source things in the United States overnight. You can't flip a switch and expect all these things to roll off the line and have it at the same cost as it was previously. So I think what they're concerned about is if a new tariff is imposed next month, what are they supposed to do? And how are they supposed to go about either finding a new supply chain or how do they, manage those additional costs? So you're seeing it across the board. It's pretty widely agreed upon from the medical community that this is going to have an adverse consequence, not just for their business, but for the patients that they so diligently support.
And I'm speaking with Tommy Aiello, Senior Director of Government Affairs at the National Taxpayers Union. And I want to pivot topics here in the remaining time I have with you, Tommy, and talk also about good housing policy that would potentially make housing more affordable for working class Americans. It's been really interesting to see how much emphasis has been on the statistics here of how few Americans are actually able to afford their first home, and how the average person is well into their late 30s, if not into their 40s, before they're able to purchase their first home. And this in my view goes well beyond just the quality of life and ensuring affordable housing for all of the benefits to family life and so forth, but it also gets into a bigger picture here of how the Democrats are trying to push for a bigger government system in terms of having more and more people dependent on welfare, fewer people actually owning their own land, their own property, because when there is ownership, you then feel a greater sense of responsibility for it, among other things. And so, a lot of this, if we don't change the housing policy and we don't look at this, is, in my opinion, just feeding into kind of a gift, basically, to the Democrats to continue some of their operational metrics. And so there's a piece in Newsweek that's titled "The U.S. Housing Market is Falling into a Deflationary Vortex," an analyst warns. And the U.S. housing market is currently in a disinflation and deflationary vortex, according to a real estate analyst who is an analytics platform app founder, and so is saying that home price growth on the national basis has slowed to basically flat year over year, and now home prices are declining in almost half of the states. So meanwhile, rent growth has slowed to its lowest level in 14 years, indicating that we are just seeing inventory pile up across the housing market. That may be good news. I mean, I don't think that's true for my home state of Florida, where so many people are moving in that housing is going up, and definitely cost of housing is going up. But overall, your perspective on policy here in terms of the housing market.
Well, I love the conversation we're having today, because there's nothing people think about more on a monthly basis than the cost of their healthcare and the cost of their housing. So it's really fundamental conversations that we're having that so many people, including myself, worry about on a monthly basis. And I think what we're seeing right now with the drop in interest rates down about a point since President Trump took office, every drop in a mortgage point, Americans can save $200 a month. That's a lot of money for the average American family, for anybody, right? $200 a month. That could be gas in the car for 2 weeks, a week's worth of groceries, just from doing nothing, just from having that slight change in federal policy. So that's why it's so important that the president continues to push for lower rates across the board. There's another potential rate cut on the horizon tomorrow and in December. So hopefully that'll continue to put downward pressure on prices. Now, I think when we talk about housing supply and how do we increase it, it's a tale of two sides of the country right now. You have Republican states like Texas, Florida, and Tennessee that have reduced these barriers to build. And what you've seen, especially in Texas, as people have moved there, is this huge flood of supply of new apartments, affordable housing. Rents in Austin are down 18% over the past 2 years. That's a great success story. In places like Los Angeles and California, it's still way too expensive to build, and that translates into higher prices for people. Prices haven't come down in those areas. They've only gone up. So it really is a tale of two sides of the country, unfortunately.
Yeah, and so how is all of this then potentially going to impact the midterms and the elections? I mean, when we have this stark contrast that we keep talking about, but it seems like the average voter doesn't necessarily see that contrast of the tale of two sides of the country, as you're mentioning. How can conservatives leverage this for the midterms?
I think everything comes down to the high cost of living and making things more affordable for people. And that's a point that we need to continue to hammer home, right? The One Big Beautiful Bill included thousands of dollars in tax cuts for working class people. That'll make it more, they'll feel more secure in April when they file their taxes, when they get a huge refund. That's a great thing. Second of all, housing. We need to continue to build affordable housing for people. The private sector, not the government, obviously, but the federal government still has a role. There's this really great bill by Congressman Mike Flood of Nebraska. He's a conservative champion for housing policy. He has this great bill that says if localities want to apply for affordable housing money from the federal government, They need to show how they're reducing barriers to land size use, reducing barriers to building affordable housing. He doesn't want that money just to go to these localities and they squander it. He wants to know how you're spending this money to actually increase affordable housing. It's a great bill. We're proud to support it, and I would encourage all your listeners to look into it too, and urge your member of Congress to support it.
Yeah, that's a great piece of legislation, and so it's the Identifying Regulatory Barriers to Housing Supply Act, which I believe. Do you have the House bill? I think it's House Resolution 4659. So the Identifying Regulatory Barriers to Housing Supply Act, introduced by Representative Mike Flood, and so that's an action item. If for all of this conversation, if listeners are saying, well, what can I do between the government shutdown, all of this going on, this is something that you can urge your members of Congress to look at as they're contemplating the shutdown. But really appreciate it. Tommy Aiello, the Senior Director of Government Affairs at the National Taxpayers Union. Really appreciate your excellent commentary on all of these things that we really do need to pay attention to, because you're right. I mean, food and healthcare and mortgage is everything that we're concerned about on a monthly basis. So we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.